All right. Hi, everyone. Our timer is telling us that we should be live by now, so I'm not sure if maybe more people are joining. Don't mind sharing the specific link with others because well, people could still join. Um, we could all be in different time zones, maybe wanting to do different things, going home, wanting to lunch, going to bed. So as a result, I'll try to keep it short. If you have questions, you can just ask them in the chat, and I will answer them at the end or maybe in between, depending on the topic. Um, Today, we'll be talking about, obviously, in a broader scope, page speed and also different tools. And I'm not going to tell you what tools to use, although obviously we are also going to talk about a specific tool today. But in general, it doesn't really matter. I guess the most important part is where you get the most value out of. So yeah, if you like to use a combination of both lab data and field data, or only lab data because maybe your site doesn't have any field data yet, it all doesn't matter. I'm not here to rant on any tools because once again, in the end, specific tools could work for you, but maybe not for me, and the other way around. All right. That being said, I'm just going to kick off. Well, it already says in the screen, I'm Erwin Hofman in English. In Dutch, it's Erwin Hofman, but yeah, good luck trying to pronounce that. Um, I'm still a developer today, but I've grown into being a consultant, site speed, page speed consultant. And as part of RUMvision, I'm the CTO. And my goal today, our goal today, I should say, our goal today is to, well, learn a bit more about the differences between lab data and field data, how site speed can be challenging, um, different metrics that you could use. Because, well, in the end, obviously, we all know by now about Core Web Vitals, thanks to Google, but there is more than just Core Web Vitals, obviously. And I'm also going to share a few quick wins, not too much because that's not the goal today, but at least show how you could use monitoring toolings and how they can help you to spot issues. And if any real user monitoring is actually even a solution for your business at all. Once again, it depends on, well, yeah, the tooling and also the size of your website or web shop, if any specific toolings have any value for your business. All right. I actually did a poll yesterday on LinkedIn, and I saw that a lot of people are using lab data once again, which is good because in the end, field data should be well, yeah, maybe complete your lab data findings. So the challenge is, I guess, I still notice that a lot of people are actually only looking at lab data. For example, Lighthouse or web page test is an example of lab data, although web page test is very valuable, if you ask me. Lighthouse, I almost never look at Lighthouse when I'm doing audits myself because it's just lacking nuances. And that's also one of the goals, trying to explain that one tool alone isn't the single source of truth. In the case of lab data, once again, examples are maybe G2metrix, Pingdom tools, Lighthouse, and well, yeah, G2metrix is using Lighthouse under the hood. And web page test is that you don't get to test all possible differences, all possible conditions. Because in the end, I often like to say that no user is the same, and especially their conditions aren't the same. So, for example, the type of devices they are using, or the type of internet speed, maybe the battery level. Some phones tend to throttle the CPU when the battery is low, for example. So those are only three, maybe four examples, but there are way more reasons why my experience might not be the same as well the experience of my parents, for example. Typically, because if I'm fed up with my mobile device and I want to buy a new device, I often hand over my device to my parents. So you always have an audience which are maybe also a generation of device behind of others. And in the end, lab data is often only testing under specific conditions, and you might miss those varying conditions. That's where field data comes in. Supplementary to lab data, once again, it can be supplementary. And field data is actually trying to tell you more about your real users. One example is Google PageSpeed Insights, but only if you've got a sufficient amount of visitors. When using PageSpeed Insights, it will try to show you data based on real visitors. And that's already a good start. If you didn't start with performance monitoring yourself, real user monitoring, then basically the PageSpeed Insights data is already a solid start. Because it is tracking data, once again, based on real users, which could be under different conditions, different internet speed, and also different devices. So we are then talking about real users. And if we are talking about conversion, we better talk about real users as well, because lab data tools won't lead to any revenue, and real users will. So that's why you should also try to look at field data as well. This is an example to zoom in a little bit. Over here we see basically field data at the top of the page, and this is a typical a typical result you could get when using PageSpeed Insights. You would then see real user data at the top only when your tested domain has a sufficient amount of visitors, and then lab data metrics at the bottom. And when I say sufficient amount of visitors, obviously Google wants to draw a solid conclusion, and it is only able to draw a solid conclusion when your site or shop has a sufficient amount of visitors. And currently it's about 16 million domains that are being tracked by Google. 16 million domains, of which Google thinks that those domains are having a sufficient amount of visitors. If you don't have a sufficient amount of visitors, you could still use a form of real user monitoring to still get an idea of data based on real user experiences, but you won't get it from Google. You won't get it from Google Search Console, for example. And over here, we can see a clear difference, especially when looking at the largest control paint, which is often about, the hero image or the biggest text node, like a heading 1 on a blog post. So basically the biggest image above the biggest node, I should say, element above the fold. And we can see a big gap between real user data, which is 2 seconds, and lab data, which is 15.3 seconds. Well, nobody wants to wait for the most important element for about 15 seconds, so that would normally lead into a huge bounce. But luckily, the green data is telling us that in real life, it isn't actually that bad. And this is already one of the nuances, one of the differences between field data and lab data. In this case, Lighthouse, as part of PageSpeed Insights, is testing under specific conditions, which isn't representing experiences of, or I should say, conditions of real users. So in real life, experiences could be way better. It could also be the other way around, unfortunately. I also sometimes see Lighthouse data being very green, and then real user data being orange or red. Actually, in real life, visitors aren't having an optimal experience. If I see this happening, then sometimes the Lighthouse score is being faked, for example, by removing all JavaScript or all third parties when Lighthouse is visiting the page. But those third parties are still being executed when a real visitor is visiting the page. Other causes could be time to first byte, because although I sometimes see people posting on LinkedIn about how you could use Lighthouse to test your web host and how fast your web host is, but that isn't the case. Lighthouse won't take into account the time first byte, because Lighthouse really is a front-end performance monitoring solution only, or front-end testing solution only. So yeah, it will get rid of any big time first byte hiccups, because yeah, once again, it could currently be a bottleneck. Currently, you could be having a time first byte or hosting issue, but maybe tomorrow or 1 hour from now, it could be good again. So that's why Lighthouse isn't really taking into account the time first byte. But if you typically have time first byte issues because of bad hosting or just a slow running CMS, for example, then it actually is a user experience issue continuously, and then it will become an issue, and it will be factored into field data. So that's also one more important difference between field data and lab data. All right. So is PageSpeed Insights all you need? It is a very solid start. Once again, if you're especially new to PageSpeed, but most following me and maybe also joining today won't be new to PageSpeed, but otherwise, PageSpeed Insights is a solid start, because, well, once again, you just get real user data for free, and at the same time, you also get to see Lighthouse data, lab data, which could be interesting for technical stakeholders. That's also often how I try to explain the difference between lab data and field data. If you are a technical stakeholder, for example, if you're a developer, then you might want to use Lighthouse from time to time as well. And if you're not a technical stakeholder and more concerned about revenue, then you should only look at field data. But I should add, when using PageSpeed Insights or even Google Search Console, that the data will always be delayed, which might make sense, because if you've got a bad day when it comes to hosting, or maybe because of Black Friday and a lot of delays on the server, then you would suddenly not pass Core Web Vitals anymore, just because of one bad day. And obviously, at the second day, you would pass Core Web Vitals again. But basically, to remove basically all hiccups that could skew the data, Google is using a 28-day delay. On top of that, because Core Web Vitals is all part of the Google ecosystem, and also PageSpeed Insights, and also their very own browser, Google Chrome, you only get to see Google Chrome data. Or to put it differently, Google Chrome is the only browser that is silently, without you knowing, submitting data to one big database called Chrome User Experience Report. So you don't get to see Edge or Opera or Firefox or Safari user experiences. It's also only it's more than the 75th percentile. If you know how to read what you're seeing in PageSpeed Insights, it's still quite valuable, because you can see different buckets, how many visitors, or expressed in percentages, how many visitors are having an optimal experience, etc. But typically, they then show the 75th percentile, which basically means we are looking at the 25 100 minus 75, the 25 worst experiences, and then at the best experience within the worst 25% experiences. Why? Well, basically, because if you achieve in passing the 75th percentile, then you also achieved in optimizing for at least 75% of your visitors, Google Chrome visitors. However, and some of you might be a developer as well, or coming from a technical background. And we then, I guess it's quite logic, but we all then know that the first page hit will often be worse, because no DNS lookup is cached, no CSS JavaScript is cached. So the first page hit will always be worse, will often be worse than the second page hit or a returning visit. But we don't get to see these nuances in PageSpeed Insights or Google Search Console. But those do matter, especially because if the first experience is worse, then you might want to optimize the first experience and also test the first experience when doing that data testing, because the first experience is still quite important. The first experience is important for user engagement, and well, yeah, visitors might decide to actually click to other pages depending on the experience during the first page hit. Within PageSpeed Insights, there's also a, well, yeah, lack of alerts and well, although we do get to see recommendations, obviously, in Lighthouse, but just not active recommendations. And there also are some nuances to those recommendations, which I will show in another slide. And you only get to see data per page if a specific page has a sufficient amount of page views. And I'm not sure how much it is. I did try to look into this based on Google Analytics profiles of some clients. And as far as I could tell, you need about 500 Google Chrome page views per device per month. So that's not a lot. It's doable, but it is a boundary. So different tools that we could use. The first one is Lighthouse. We all get to see, well, we all get to use Lighthouse. And I also see a question by Luke. PageSpeed Insights is the last 28 days. So the data I see today is September 14 till October 8. Well, today it's October 13. So in that case, it would be October 15th. So yeah, that's basically correct. Yeah. All right. So different tools that you can use is Lighthouse itself, other lab data testing tools like Calibre, Debugbear, Pingdom, GTmetrix. Web page test is also lab data testing, but we put it in a different, well, yeah, bucket, because web page test really is adding more value than the typical lab data tests is what I like to believe. So that's why we didn't sum up web page tests with the other lab data testing tools. Then you could also use PageSpeed Insights. So the first one was Lighthouse, and the fourth is PageSpeed Insights, because it is combining both lab data and field data. Although web page test is already also showing field data as well when testing specific pages, which also has a sufficient amount of visitors. Then we've got Trio, which is an awesome tool when it comes to presenting data, and it also has historic data. So you could even, when registering, when you've got an account, you can look back for 3 years instead of just 12 months. But it does come with a delay. So before I said that PageSpeed Insights is coming with a delay of 28 days, which basically means if you're going to do a deploy tomorrow, you will only see fully fresh data after 4 weeks, 28 days. And a typical merchant, the typical web shop might be doing more deploys than just one per 4 weeks. So that's why it might be more important to do additional monitoring. And once again, going back to Trio, Trio is an awesome tool. I get to see trends right away when doing PageSpeed audits. However, the downside is it has a bigger delay because it comes from a different type of data set, and as a result, the data is only updated every second Tuesday of the following month. I say second, but I'm not sure if I'm correct, but I think so that it is the second, yeah. So as a result, the 1st of September was only published 2 days ago. So yeah, that's almost 6 weeks delay. So Trio is awesome for general trends and see if some huge differences occurred along the way. But otherwise, it does come with a big delay, and also no page level specific data, just origin summary, overall data for your whole domain. This is where we try to make difference, because, well, I'm also doing PageSpeed audits, and I was often missing day-to-day data or more nuanced data, such as the differences, especially the differences between unique visits and successive page hits, where most of CSS would be cached already. I often also missed differences between device memories, so I couldn't really tell if the performance issues like the IOP metric and the first input delay metric, basically just a user frustration, if it was caused by if it was caused by the type of device or internet speed. Normally it isn't the internet speed, but I didn't really get to see the differences per device type or even internet speed when it comes to the LCP, the largest one for Paint. Or typically, UTM parameters or Google Click IDs in the URL. Sometimes people forget to cache such or exclude such query strings from the caching rules, and as a result, it could impact the typeface byte as well. But we don't get to see these nuances in all other tools, unless you specifically test for those URLs, obviously. And after that, the next step would be to make site speed optimization part of your overall process. All right, and this is basically what I discussed just a few seconds before. This is what we saw in one of, in multiple cases actually, in a lot of cases to be exact. So I guess we all know the conditions where people are clicking to your web pages from specific ads, Google ads, Facebook ads, or newsletters using UTM parameters, or even LinkedIn nowadays is using UTM parameters, although internally. But you could add them yourselves when linking to your own pages and want to know where people are coming from. However, if you're doing it without consideration, and if you actually are caching your pages for faster typeface byte, faster response time, and if you forget to exclude those common query strings, then it could massively impact your experience, and especially experience for specific visitors. And this specific screenshot is a good example. They obviously they forgot to exclude the Facebook Click ID parameter. So they successfully excluded the Google Click ID parameter because the typeface byte is almost the same as no query string at all. However, the Facebook Click ID is quite bad. As a matter of fact, looking at the horizontal colored bars, it's quite clear to see that the amount of green, the amount of horizontal green bar is way bigger within the no get parameter bucket and the Google Click ID parameter bucket. So both the exact number, more than 2 seconds, as well as the width of the colored bars is indicating that there is an issue within the Facebook Click ID bucket. And then anyone looking at this data then directly knows, oh, I forgot to also exclude this specific parameter. And I obviously get that some parameters will always be dynamic, like when going from page 1 to page 2 within basically on-site search results. But otherwise, these typical parameters that won't change any layout or any contents on the page should just be excluded. All right, I'm going to speed up a little bit. So how site speed can be challenging? Once again, because of the difference in devices, internet speed, and in the end, it's maybe hard to tell where issues are if you're just looking at PageSpeed Insights data, because those won't be telling you the differences between unique page views or successive page views or specific query strings, etc. So the solution, one solution, I often joke about this on LinkedIn as well. We could just hand over all of our audiences the latest iPhone, or basically just the latest and the newest devices. But that's not really an option. And in most cases, people also aren't able to spend money on the latest devices. So that's why we still have a challenge ourselves, why we should still try to optimize ourselves. One more question. Do all these tools measure external scripts like Tag Manager, Lead Feeder, etc.? How do you avoid these scripts to influence your page speed? It's not really a subject of today, but to answer it a little bit, um, especially within lab data, third parties will be impacting your overall score because it will impact the time to interactive, and the time to interactive is taken into account within lab data tests. Within um, real user monitoring and field data testing, it really depends on the metrics you use. In some toolings, you can use custom metrics as well. Nowadays, also within RUMvision. Um, but back in the days, this actually is a good question, because back in the days, the core web vitals wasn't really taking into account third parties. You could easily pass core web vitals with a ton of third parties going on your web shop or website. But with the new metric, the IP metric, if you didn't look into it yet, then it's an interesting metric. It's a better alternative to the first input delay, and it might actually replace the first input delay metric in the future. So it might become part of core web vitals in the future. I expect it to become part of the core web vitals in the future. So with this new metric, it is actually taken into account in a better way. Not as much as lab data scores, but it's already an improvement. So this is also indicating that Google is also trying to come up with better metrics, because out of the 60 million domains, it's about, I think, 96 or 98% that was passing the first input data metric. So Google figured, okay, maybe this isn't the best metric, we should come up with a better alternative, which then became IMP. All right. Going back to the slides, and another quick win that we see happening as well. And Lighthouse actually already changed this behavior and already embedded this recommendation themselves as well. Because sometimes, and especially back in the days with the typical WordPress plugins, they would then start to lazy load all of the images. However, because of how browsers work, it would then also delay the first image, maybe your most important image, like a hero image for blog posts or homepage or product images. And that's actually not a good idea. It's not a good idea to also lazy load your main image above the fold. But if you stop lazy loading the first image, you should continue lazy loading all other images. Otherwise, you would still end up in a situation where the most important image is competing with the other images, and they will then basically also push each other back as well. Well, to explain it in a simple way. So what we implemented here in this specific case is, well, obviously we removed lazy loading from the main image, and as a result, the LCP improved big time on the homepage by 32%. And we also get to see next to the improvement and also the relative improvement, 32.5%, we also get to see the exact number, and we also get to see well, the distribution. Looking at the horizontal colored bars, we can clearly see that the amount of red reduced and the amount of green increased. So we basically try within our solution, RUMvision. This is a screenshot from RUMvision, adjusted screenshot, but still. And you can see that we're trying to, well, basically show that there was an improvement or regression in different ways, relatively, absolute numbers, and also distribution. All right. Continuing with RUMvision, just a small demo for which I should share my screen actually. So let's see if I succeed in doing so, and I am. All right. So this is a Dutch web shop. I also have, well, let's first start with this international web shop. When I log in again, there we go. All right. And I set a specific reminder for myself to jump to, I think it's just one. Could be wrong, but let's see. Let's find out. Not a big win yet, so maybe I should use this one actually. Okay, I'm first going to jump to a different example. Okay, what we did over here, this is also a very interesting one, so I'm actually going to share another quick win. Well, yeah, it is a quick win actually. This website, catalog website, was using an at import, CSS at import rule in their own CSS. So they actually ended up in a change request, which resulted in a massive delay. So I notified them about this and asked them, well, I advised them to remove the at import construction. They were using typekit fonts, using, well, yeah, at import. And after removing the at import, we saw an improvement of 28% at the 80th percentile. Let's jump to 75. We typically use the 80th percentile to have a bit of margin to Google's Core Web Vitals percentile. But nevertheless, it's still 28.3%. Actually, even at the 25th percent, so even the visitors that were already having optimal experience, even those visitors saw an improvement of 8.8%. And this is where additional nuances become interesting, because looking at unique page views, the improvement actually was 33, almost 34% at the 25th percentile. So these are visitors that are typically already had an optimal experience, are typically already under very optimal conditions. So let's get back to the 80th percentile. So looking at the 20% worst visitors, and we can still see the differences between a successive page hit and a unique page hit. And the reason is, well, once again, successive page hit means most of the CSS is cached already, but when you are using at import, it's still a bottleneck, and as a result, still a lot of gains within the successive bucket, but huge gains within the unique bucket. And normally, within Core Web Vitals, you would only see a 28% improvement, but it's then interesting to dive a little bit deeper. All right, let's also show some new features that we implemented. Because once again, there is more than just Core Web Vitals. There is life after Core Web Vitals, I would say. Back in the days, we typically started to use the page load event, for example, and dump content loaded. But those events, those metrics doesn't really matter, aren't really telling a story about perceived performance, how users are perceiving the web page. So that's why the Core Web Vitals already is a good start. But if you do want to, well, use or implement your own metrics, well, you can do so. This week we just published new features to add your own element timing, for example, to always know when the logo was shown or when the heading 1 was shown. Or you can set performance marks in specific parts of your source code to know when specific events happened. For example, when the style sheet was done parsing or when the end of the head was reached. And also server timing. Nowadays, it's quite easy to send some additional response headers with your pages about timings within your CMS, for example, and you can use them as well. As a matter of fact, we were able to, looking at the typeface byte, and we just published this, so not a lot of page hits yet. But in this case, we get to see the difference between the typeface byte between a hit and a miss when server-side caching was happening and when server-side caching wasn't able to respond with a page. And what's interesting to know in this case is we are also timing the time within our PHP code. So looking at the total server time, it's only 7 milliseconds because it could be fetched from cache. And now you can now clearly see that there is a big latency between when our PHP code was done executing code and when typeface byte happens. Because the total server time, the total time spent by PHP is only 7 milliseconds thanks to caching. But when we go to typeface byte, it's still more than 300 milliseconds, just because of latency. And I often hear people say, yeah, we've got a typeface byte of 20 milliseconds and 80 milliseconds. Yeah, but that's you, but not the typical user. And it's about, well, maybe not only the typical user, but also about the long tail of your users. You also want to enable visitors under difficult circumstances to, well, basically to convert as well. All right, and you see a little snapshot over here of one of our other pages to also make our tooling accessible for less technical stakeholders, maybe product owners or CTOs, for example. There's one more question. I've got a card page which shows high CLS on mobile, but whatever I do, I can't reproduce it using my devices or lab tests. Can RUMvision help me out to find out what's causing that CLS? Well, just like most other tools, especially field data testing, our tool isn't going to solve your issues. It's basically only going to show you in which buckets you should search and look. And well, yeah, you get to learn the circumstances where issues are happening. So you might learn that it's typically happening under well, difficult conditions like well, low device memory, for example, slow internet maybe. And we've got about 26 different dimensions. And using the filters and recommendations, they will tell you under which conditions issues are happening. And then you know what to test for. So then you can jump to web page test and you know exactly what conditions to use to try to reproduce it. That's also one of the goals of all those nuances, all those, well, maybe 50 metrics and 26 dimensions to give you more insights and the possibility to deep dive. So here's RUMvision, or just basically real user monitoring in general. Is it a solution for you? And obviously, if you do care, because smaller websites, I often hear website owners of smaller websites saying, yeah, I don't really care, my website is converting anyway, or it's just an online, well, just an online portfolio, and that's it. Then it might not matter that much, or maybe not even at all. But if you've got specific goals on your website, like the amount of contact forms being filled in, or on a web shop, obviously revenue, then it should matter. You should look at real user data. And well, yeah, both from a user experience perspective, but also maybe SEO. And although I might be shooting myself in the foot here, but yeah, the impact on SEO might still not be too big. It really depends. It depends on different factors, obviously. But when you've got online competitors with the same content quality, maybe, and domain authority, then actually page speed as part of Core Web Vitals could also become, well, yeah, a deal breaker, maybe. But I often hope that people well, want to optimize for UX first and SEO second. And even Google, on one of their pages, even Google is indicating or suggesting that, well, you should use more nuanced reviews and monitoring on top of the Chrome user experience data. So on top of Google Search Console or on top of PageSpeed Insights data. If you are very curious where this was written, well, you could basically Google this specific quote or send us an email and we'll send you the specific article. But even Google themselves is advising you to use additional real user monitoring. So once again, going back to the basics, PageSpeed Insights data, and especially the field data, already is a solid start. But on top of that, if you really want to address page speed and be on top of real user data and do care about real user experiences, then you should want to use additional real user monitoring. Last quick one, and this is a very interesting one. I typically start my general page speed training sessions with a quiz mode, and then asking the audience different questions. For example, when does page speed not matter anymore when it comes to the LCP, when it comes to the hero image, or, well, yeah, basically the image above the fold? And we typically see with RUMvision, we typically see that as of 5 megabytes per second, the internet speed does not play a role anymore. as of 5 megabytes per second, the type of device will start to play a bigger role, will start to become more important. Because, well, yeah, let's be fair. If we are having an image of 70 kilobytes or maybe 200 kilobytes and we want to convert it into WebP, it does get smaller, and smaller is better. Also, maybe for carbon emissions, but for a real user experience, it might not actually matter. I've seen in the Netherlands and also Scandinavia, like Norway, Sweden, a smaller image won't won't specifically lead to a better LCP anymore. From a certain point, other issues might play a bigger role and might be important to address. So you should also know how to prioritize. And that's maybe also the biggest challenge within Lighthouse. Lighthouse is trying to advise you to do a lot of stuff and to address a lot of, opportunities. But after maybe spending a week or 2 weeks, or if you're a big e-commerce, maybe 2 months, if you're spending 2 months on addressing all of those to-dos, you might not always see wins out of each individual to-do, out of each individual recommendation, because it really depends on your audience and their conditions if it will lead to an improvement. And obviously also, it will also depend on the rest of your page hygiene, I should say. However, obviously using 2 megabyte or 3 megabyte hero images because your content marketeer added those images still isn't the best idea. But if you're already having smaller images, then yeah, creating WebP out of them might not always lead to improvements. So adding site speed optimization to your process. Well, once again, I like to talk about nuanced data because in the end, page insights is just lacking nuances. And one of the more important ones, well, I showed before, is query strings like Facebook click ID, UGM parameters, but also is it the first page hit where issues are happening or the second page hit? Google isn't telling you this, but it is important if you want to address specific situations. Or maybe you aren't even aware of those differences. And with just page speed data alone, you also aren't able to become aware, unfortunately. It might also make it easier to include all stakeholders once you know and embrace the fact that it's about your audience instead of, well, just one overall number. Some people might still want to look at one overall number, which might sound convenient, but we can't express page speed in one number. It's just more nuanced than just one number. Then implement optimizations that you get out of any monitoring, reuse monitoring on lab data. And obviously, it is a continuous process. How do we do it at RUMvision? And I hope I already was able to, emphasize a few of these. First of all, if you do engage with us, we will help you with picking the right URLs as well. Because, well, one interesting example is if you are selling bikes, maybe an e-bike and maybe a cheaper bike, an e-bike might actually also attract visitors with more budget, and maybe those visitors actually had the funds, had the money to buy better devices as well. So even within the same web shop, some pages might lead to better experience than others. Cheap products might lead to worse experiences because the typical visitor visiting cheap products might also visit the page under, well, using a low-end device, a worse device maybe. So even if it's within the same web shop and maybe even the same template type, like product page, there could still be differences between different URLs. Obviously, just like any new tool, there is a lot to discover. So next to having an on-site help section within our tooling, we will support you as well. And if we spot quick wins ourselves, we will notify you as well. And we could even help you set up your very own alerts. So we've got our, self-defined alerts as well. And you could even create own alerts if you want to keep, if you want to stay in the loop about specific situations. That's it for now. Um, Almost 45 minutes on the spot. So if there are any questions, I'll be here for a few more minutes. And otherwise, I'll see you on LinkedIn or maybe even on RUMvision when registering. You can just go to insights.rumvision.com or go to our website and follow the links over there to already maybe start your trial. Thanks, all. Just in case, I'll be sure to also enable the private chat. Just to be sure, we indeed also have a trial version within RUMvision. So going to rumvision.com, you should find a link to the application, and the trial version will start working once. Well, it will start working right away, but the amount of days as part of the trial will start once you implemented the snippet, the tracking snippet. All right, I don't see any more private questions, so I'll wrap up in 20 seconds. All right, bye bye, or see you on LinkedIn.